All right, we're live.
All right. Hey, what's up, everybody out there in YouTube land? Scott O Green here from I'd Rather Be Drawing on I'd Rather Be Motivated, episode 14, where David Fleming and I are going to be sitting down with inker extraordinaire Peter Palmiotti to talk all things ink and has comics before we get this Inktober rolling. So before we roll into what Peter's got going on, just real quick, where you can find me when I'm not here. I'm working on my 100 days of making comics, and you can find a lot of that over on Instagram under Mr. Green Draws, mr.greendraws. So if you want to check anything out, look over there. And that's why I'm working on my new October comic, a pumpkin-headed monster character. So David, where can we find you when you're not here on the YouTubes with us?
All right, when I'm not on the YouTubers, you can find me at Art of Mr. Fleming on Instagram and Mr. David Fleming on Facebook. And that's the best two places to find me. I always have a link tree up on one of those two places at all times that shows the website and the YouTube and just all the other places that I get the action on. All right. Oh yeah, currently I'm working on what we call, or I'm calling, Analog Missions, which is a comic that I've been brewing in my brain for a really, really long time. I'm really excited to get going on it. I'm using Inktober this year to kind of like post things of it, and yeah, I can't be more stoked right now. So over to you, Peter.
Hello, hello. I am Peter Palmiotti. Yeah, so for anybody who doesn't know me, I've been working in the comic industry since 1991. So I'm a young guy. I've worked for Marvel, DC, Valiant Comics, had a few things published by Image, and a slew of independent publishers. Currently working on a bunch of my own creations, of which this is Retro, will be the title character. Well, that's the villain. This is the next page. This is Retro. Yeah, this is mostly penciled the first issue, and I'm going in with inks now, and I'll be doing, it's much like Avengers. I'll be doing a title team book, and Retro will be part of that team, but there'll be a couple of other single superhero titles as well. And that won't be the only thing. I'll be publishing random one-shots, some projects I just shelved for various reasons. I'll be getting back to. And I have other people interested in publishing through Has Comics, but I really want to get my books off the ground first and see where it all goes. And, you know, I don't want to jump the gun. But yeah, it's I've been freelance, like, I worked for Marvel and DC back in the 90s, and I've been pretty much freelance since around 2000, just working with different independent publishers, but also making my own art and just making my own art and inking and just keeping busy. I've joined YouTube back in 2007, but really didn't start making videos until, I guess, around 2012, something like that. I'm trying to be better about it. Definitely around the time that Kevin Cross came up with 100 Days of Making Comics, with Scott, you're a part of. I'm currently doing another 100 days myself. I completed a channel, the challenge years ago, but I'm back at it, focusing on Retro and focusing on another book that a team on called Blood Rights. Yeah, I got a lot of things going on.
Yeah, you got a lot of irons in the fire for sure. It's actually quite impressive. And just to say up top, talking about an inking show, that page that you were just showing, those inks look spectacular on that. Whose pencils are on there?
This is an artist called Richard Fuchsia, and you know, he's up to other things currently, but he's got like 7 or 8 pages to finish out this issue. I might have to get another issue, another artist for like the ongoing series.
Gotcha. Well, you guys definitely have something special going on, like the way you guys work together, because that looks so nice.
It is pretty sweet, and I still have to choose a colorist. I have a couple of people in mind. You know, balancing like my finances and getting somebody reasonable priced is always a challenge. But you know, I have a couple of people in mind. You know, probably the person I want most is the most expensive, so we'll see.
Ain't that how it works?
Yeah.
But yeah, you definitely like you're out there. You've got a lot of fingers and a lot of pies. It seems like watching you. You're on Twitter. You're on everything. You're everywhere, which is really cool. Because you're not just dropping stuff. You seem to be really involved on all those things, and you really seem excited to be involved in the community, which I can say I've benefited from because you've given me a few pat on the backs as things are going along, which are always very much appreciated. So yeah, just cool how active you are in the community. It's cool to see.
Yeah, you know, it's like I'm part of D100s. You know, I used to manage the sort of Facebook group. I handed it over to Mike Emirates, who's doing a fine job with it now. We have bigger and better plans for it. You know, it's like it's almost like it's just random people doing it, and we want to push it in more of a direction where it could be as big as Comicsgate or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure, right? Be the next thing people are talking about, but maybe they're happy to talk about
it. yeah. It's you know, the 100 is about, you know, it's a lot more positive vibe. There's no religion, no politics involved. It's just a lot of people working on their comics. You know, the idea behind it, for those that don't know, is that it's, you know, you work on your comic for 100 days straight, 30 minutes at least each day, to, you know, really not push it aside, not put it on the shelf, to actually go forward and you know, you probably won't complete your comic in 100 days, but at least it will get you in the habit. And this was all started by Kevin Cross. I'm also part of the Artcasters. I'm a moderator on the Facebook group. And you know, was started by Jeff Lafferty, and it's, you know, there's been different sort of YouTube collections of Artcasters. The current is Josh Kimball and Scott Serklin, who do a weekly show. And it's just a fantastic, it's a fantastic show, and the group is a fantastic collection of people. And you can go check that out. My group,
that one's how I learned about the 100s, was from the Artcasters back when.
Oh yeah,
Kevin Cross and Jeff Lafferty were still there and everything. So
that's right. Yeah.
Sure.
I have a Facebook group called Creator Owned, which I have a couple of moderators on that, and I hope to do a lot bigger and better things with that in mind. I might even make a channel exclusively for promotion of the people in the group, as well as getting the word out that, you know, if you're a comic book maker, you know, I want to really turn it into something that maybe you know, we'll go to conventions, we'll have events, kind of thing. I'm all about supporting other independent comic book creators, because it's really hard to have a voice out there in all the minutia. There's just thousands and thousands of comics each month, and if you're a small independent creator, it's you know, hard to get seen.
Well, I like the idea that the tide raises all ships, and I like the idea that if you just kind of constantly sort of help out the guy next to you, then that just kind of goes in a circle and everyone ends up helping out everybody. But I really love it in the comic community, and like when I see people like yourself doing this, because it's pretty obvious it comes from a genuine place. So it's not you out there just dumping your art out there to just try to as many places as you can so people see it. Like I said before, you really participate in it. And for someone like David and I, who are quite a bit more at the beginning of our journey through comics and everything, to be able to just sort of hang out and rub elbows with a guy who's been inking for the big two and everybody else in between for a while, it's pretty special to be able to share that with everything. So definitely thank you for all that. It's also been inspiring just with like your talk of how you're really passionate about independent comics and getting creators out there and talking them up. And then like hearing Jeff Lafferty talking about getting excited about what we can do for indie comics. Because really at this point, I don't think there's much of an argument with like comic books are art. You know, it's accepted as art by enough people that if people don't think of it as art, then it's just something that's not for them. The same way that some people might not like abstract art or fine art or, you know, different things like that. It's accepted. It's out there. It's in bookstores. So now it really seems like it's up to all of us creators on the smaller independent level to go, okay, what's the next step? Well, it's getting all of the little guy stuff out there instead of just the big two and Image, which I love all those guys. But so anyway, it's been inspiring for me and giving me different ideas and try to like figuring out ways to help the community. So anyway, I love that type of attitude, seeing it out there. It is inspiring.
Yeah, I see we looking at the video, and we got a couple of people in the well, we got one person commenting, Ronnie. Hey, Ronnie.
Hello, Mr. Red, and happy birthday to you out there. It's his birthday today, so thanks for hanging out with us.
You call him Red? Why you call him Red?
Red, he told me one time he's got bright red hair from what I see, and he said, hey, my friends call me Red. So I thought that was
okay,
a good
cool.
time to go, all right, Red, how's it going?
Yeah, I saw pictures. I didn't know people call him Red. That's cool.
I think that pretty much that's it, man. That story that was awesome. I'm so thrilled I can't speak anymore.
Well, I think it's as simple as that. I don't think he red hair. He goes by Red.
I just love that. It's like I was waiting for like the coolest story I've ever heard, and it was like, yep, he's got red hair.
I'm even trying to think of something better now, but I mean, come on. What do you want?
Isn't that the father from that '70s show was called Red?
Exactly. Yeah. So anytime someone's like, hey, just call me Red, I'm more than happy to. And if he wants to call me a dumbass as much as he wants, I'm totally cool with it.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about Inktober and inking. I guess if you guys were up for it. I'm joining Inktober this year. You know, I've done it previous years, but I forget. I don't think I ever like fully did all 31 days. You know, like I get more ambitious than anything and fall on my face, but I don't know. I like doing that. I like falling on my face, I guess.
I feel like it's better with art to have eyes too big for your stomach, you know. I'm okay. It doesn't discourage me, you know. If, like you said, you might not get done with your whole comic in 100 days of making comics, but you'll get far enough along. So
yeah,
trying for 31 drawings and getting 21, I feel like is still a success, you know.
Right.
Yeah, and I think even like, you know, Inktober was created by Jeff Parker, for those that don't know, and I think he pretty much said, like, for those that can't do all 31 days, you know, a lot of people have a day job and that do artwork on the side. It's okay to join, you know, on the weekends or whenever you can and do a piece. I mean, it's just a matter of joining in. It's such an avalanche of artists that like pop up out of nowhere. I every year I meet new artists that do amazing work, and it's very, very, very inspirational. So yeah, I'm doing it this year.
And, you know, I've never seen anybody get on there and go, hey, you only posted 20 drawings instead of 31. Take the Inktober hashtag off of all of it.
You've
So,
been
like,
disqualified.
right? And David and I are big fans of like kind of taking different art challenges and drawing challenges and making them work for yourself. Like you said, if you can only do some of the days, that's fine. I think the first times that David and I did it, we would sort of we were pretty slow at it all. So we'd post a pencil drawing the first day and then the ink drawing the second, and just sort of do that. So last year I was in the middle of making a comic book, so kind of what David's doing this year. So instead of like putting that on hold, you ink a panel, to kind of help move that forward for a day's inking. So definitely big fans of making that stuff work for you.
Yeah.
Now, I know it's somewhat of a cliche question to walk up to an artist and go, what pen are you using? But from you, an experienced inker, I was wondering if, in a nutshell, if you kind of had a few weapons of choice that are kind of your reliable go-tos, if we could start off from sort of square one with inking.
Yeah, I mean, I use the basic tools of the traditional inker, and that's I don't think you can get them anymore. But Winsor Newton Series 7. I use different numbers, but mostly a number 1. Sometimes thicker, which is a higher number for like filling in major big black areas. Sometimes like a 0 if I'm doing really fine detail work. I use a Hunt 102. That's a quill, nib, whatever you want to call it. I'm not the guy to ask for technical terms, but
The golden is a quill and the metal is a nib. I'm the nerd of these things.
Okay. Well, good for you.
I like the Hunt 102 part. I'm here taking notes.
Yeah. The quill, I mean, both tools, like when I started inking, it's like I did go to art school. I went to High School of Art and Design in Manhattan, New York, for those that don't know. And I went for cartooning and animation. Then I went for college. I only went 2 years before I dropped out of that. But I took advertising art in college. And that was a college out in Brooklyn. And then, I sort of fell out of art until I got back into it in 91. And pretty much in 91, I decided to just, go for it. Comics were something I loved, and art was also something I loved. And I wasn't that good at an inker to begin with. And I had to really learn how to work with a brush. Brush is what I went with initially, and I took any job that would come my way. Mostly, I was helping out a number of professional inkers on their projects, just filling in blacks. Eventually, I got to do some background inks and work my way up. But I was like, it's almost like you just have to do it and force yourself and learn. And I worked 7 days a week, sometimes around the clock, just practicing when I didn't have work in front of me to do. And then quill, I really had to force myself to learn it, because it was a tool that is really good for the tiny details. You can do everything in brush, but quill, learning a quill, it makes it much, much faster to do a lot of the tiny detail work. So I forced myself to learn it, because with a brush, you just laying down the lines and it just covers the paper, and it's really easy. But with a quill, you dig into the paper a lot, and you have to learn the right amount of pressure, which I'll demonstrate in a little bit. But it is a harder tool to learn, but it's equally effective for anyone that wants to learn traditional at this point in time.
It seems like across the board, I hear a lot of people say that digital and everything is great, but if you can build a foundation of the real stuff on paper, everything else can you can learn computer programs and you can learn all that, but essentially that's all to sort of mimic what it's like to do it on paper. So that's what I try to hold on to mostly because I'm just not good at doing anything on the computer. So
just keep telling yourself that.
Yeah, I was listening to somebody, I forget who, but they were talking about, you know, traditional. I think it was maybe Holly Brown.
Mm-hmm.
She was talking about traditional and digital and Inktober, one of her recent videos, and you know, like that it was a whole hoopla maybe last year, that if you didn't, like Jake Parker made a statement like, you know, Inktober is for traditional people and not digital people. But, you know, it's like, to me, it's to each its own. If you're into digital, go with digital. If you're into traditional, go with traditional. You know, back in the day, when, you know, back in the 90s, if anybody used markers, that's that was a no-no. You know,
really?
It's like the only person I knew back then that was working professionally that used markers was definitely like Gil Kane.
Okay.
But you know, it was frowned on. But you know, it's like whatever medium you're going with, whatever tools you're using. It's hey, if you're making art, you're making art. You know, if you go to art galleries like the real pompous ones, you know, they use they use any, like orange slices, I don't know, to make art.
Right.
Capital A.
Oh, sorry.
The Rio Art Gallery thing, the capital A artist thing, I love that. It gives me a little bit of a giggle. That's all.
I know the whole question of what is art. I don't know.
Another day.
Yeah. Oh boy. So then, when you're inking, is there a basic thing? I don't know how to ask this exactly. Is there a sort of philosophy that you have in mind, or a set of rules of what you're trying to accomplish when you start inking? Are you just adding the texture, just adding light and shadow? Are you working more for what's correct, or working more from a design point of view?
Yes.
Expand on
that. That's it. Great show, everyone. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's like a lot of what I do at this point in time is just muscle memory, and gut, going with my gut. It's more about making things pretty than being accurate. As far as, you know, visually, like, you know, how would things look a certain way? Like, is the shadows accurate on his leg and his arm and his back? Or, you know, it's like you can follow all that stuff, but I think if there's a good flow to it visually, then you're more than good enough. But I'll go over some basics, and I'll do it in pencil just for the moment. But you know, this is something that you know, when I was working up at Valiant, the guy in charge was Bob Layton. Anybody that doesn't know Bob Layton, he inked Iron Man for a bunch of years, and maybe I'll do this in pen so you can see it better. But so there's 3 levels to any comic page or pin-up or just illustration, whatever. You know, you got your white, you got your black. You know, just assume that this is black here. I wish I had a big thick marker nearby, but
here, you can borrow mine.
Oh, okay. So you got your white, you got your black, and everything else is just some kind of level of gray. You know, So if you got all, and now my pen's going away, dying on me. But if you got white, black, and gray on a page, then you're good. What I like to do, and you know, as an inker, it really depends on like where the artist is going with their work, and an inker is only there to embellish, which is what inkers were really called back in the day.
Embellishers?
They were embellishers. They made the pencils. They tightened them up, and they added a little bit to them. They didn't, you know, more often than not, they didn't completely, you know, influence the pencils in their style. You know, you'll get some inkers that are heavy inkers, is, you know, what I refer to them as, that completely like disguise who penciled it by laying their lines over the pencils, and it becomes a work of the more of the inker than the original penciler. But I always try to keep with the initial objective of the penciler in mind, so that adding to it, I'm adding my own take on it, but I'm not completely covering what the penciler had on the page.
That makes good sense. It seems like more of like a working with and just trying to leave your own sort of stamp, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Palmer, who is an amazing artist himself, and this is one of the older guys, but his inks on other artists tend to be very, very heavy. And part of that is because he believes in the philosophy of inking a page in 4 hours.
So he's getting physical with it and really going after it.
Yeah, so if an artist spent, like, let's just say like 10, 12 hours on a page penciling it, you know, and they gave him the assignment of inking it, he'll ink it in 4 hours, and you know, I mean, this is what I heard, so don't go to his Facebook page and start talking to him. But I
heard you hate pencilers.
Yeah,
your Palmiotti told me that.
Well, it's mostly like, you know, I mean, that's kind of a philosophy of him trying to make a really good living, like by not, you know, spending hours and hours on a page. I don't, you know, I don't blame him in the least. I tend to be a slow inker. I take my time until I deem it's perfect, then I move on to the next page. But so yeah, you got your white, solid white. And a lot of artists use white effectively. You know, it's like every panel doesn't have to have a background. You know, you know, like this particular panel here, it's just a figure and what the figure is holding. And I think that's like, it's good to break up a page sometimes with just random panels that are completely open, that don't have a heavy background. But you know, maybe you're an artist that just draws mostly just figures on a page and don't have any backgrounds. So it's good to break it up with a panel that does have backgrounds.
It makes good sense because things, you know, in comics, it seems like can get kind of cluttered quickly.
Yeah.
A real economy of space. But
yeah, and, I mean, you know, everything depends on everything else. Like if you get a writer who's kind of heavy with their word balloons and narration or, you know, whatever, like just words on a page, then you might want to go with a simpler artist to sort of balance it so that they're not covering tons of detail that the artist put into it.
That makes good sense.
Yeah. So one of the things I'll mention is like balance on a page, I tend to think in terms of I like a heavier areas of black. Not going to the extreme of say like an artist like Mike Mignola, who tends to go very heavy on a page with his black, but just more more black on a page than white. And I consider like like heavy feathering areas are almost leaning in the direction of black. This this is just my preference. There's plenty of artists out there that do what I call like linear. It's almost outlines of figures, and you'll see a lot more of that nowadays with digital art, where it's just they'll draw figures and almost no detail involved. And
almost kind of like more flat, like flatted out, but like on purpose with like just the line art sort of a thing.
Yeah, and the line art itself is just there's no difference in it. It's
gotcha.
just yeah,
line weighted. You mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
And that I mean, I've seen gorgeous work where there was no contrast in line weight. So it's all just preference. But it's like me being old school. I like to see difference in line weight. And I'm not so strict where the line work within the figure has to be thinner than the line work on the exterior lines. But when you do make the outlines thicker than the interior line weights, it does pop more, and you can see more like dimensional work much better. But with the advent of computer coloring, you could really punch things up with with just coloring alone. So, almost.
It's like a simple thing here, but in this panel that we're looking at of yours, which will go away now that I'm talking, I'm sure. But the bag of money in the bottom right-hand corner that the guy's catching,
right.
That line weight on that bag, that there's so much going on, but your eye is drawn to that bag of money, so then you see kind of really the motion of everything. It's a simple thing, it seems like, but that line is, I don't know.
Yeah.
I love line weight too. Like there's just so much to it that I think adds to storytelling.
And if you could see it, like I really like the background lines. I break.
Oh yeah.
So that it really pops that bag.
So you're not having all the piping and brick right behind that, but you don't feel like you're missing it at all there.
Yeah.
Very cool. And then so it seems like you get a really good emphasis on that. And then on the panel to the left where he's like looking at the diamond or whatever, it seems like a good choice as far as storytelling, because once again, in kind of the middle of the page where he's looking and your eye is drawn, it's easier for you to go there without a busy background on it. So
yeah,
I don't know. It just makes sense to me. Like you said before, like you are wanting to get kind of the lighting and the dimension correct and everything, but you are making choices for storytelling and design a bit more.
Yeah. So like this sort of thing, where I break the lines, is kind of referred to as a halo. It's not an extreme halo, but it's there. It's subtle. If it was like a busier background behind the bag, it would be more extreme halo, where it's just there's no line work butting up against it, or or really touching the bag line.
I gotcha.
Yeah. So it's something I like to do. Sometimes it works really well. Sometimes it's kind of a hard thing to color, because how do you color it? It just kind of looks weird sometimes.
Leave that for the colorist.
Well, you know, it's like I know that there's a lot there's a lot of things I like seeing and a lot of things I want to avoid seeing, in, you know, and especially thinking I'm going to be doing a whole series of my own books with other creators and you know, my ideas of what works and what don't work are going to become more hardcore as I go.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you see this doesn't work at all, don't ever do that again, you know. It's like you fool, why are you doing that?
You fool. you gotta use fool any chance you get. That just really shows that you're in charge. You fool.
Yes. And I will say another thing I've always done when it comes to being an inker and working with a penciler is that, you know, even before the internet, I've always made it a point to talk with the penciler. And the sort of advantage to that, or just covering my own ass to that, is that I want to give them what they're looking for. So if they tell me, you know, I imagine a certain inker inking my work, then I might lean towards what that particular inker would give. You know, I can mention a bunch of different inkers now, but you know, might confuse the issue. But but like
it seems like, you know, just have a conversation with them. If you're going for like a dark and brooding thing, that might affect how you're inking it and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's like, it's to avoid me going in blind and just doing my own thing, or you know, it's like I usually at least ask. Excuse me. Like the level of extreme I can go for. Like, do you really want this to look like something I inked with my own style, or just do I give it a light touch? You know,
gotcha.
and that helps as an inker to keep that in mind as I'm working on the book. You know,
that makes good sense.
Yeah.
We do have a question here in the chat. It says, "What was your favorite challenging inking piece?" How I kind of read that is there something that when you ink it, you're like, oh gosh, here's a crowd scene, or here's a giant brick wall, or is there a particular thing that is challenging to you that maybe you do sort of enjoy?
What's challenging are different artists. You know, it's like a lot of my career at Marvel in DC was with Jim Calfury, and he's a challenge in himself. But I think that the most challenging piece I've worked on was a comic book cover for an independent title that was penciled by Mike Grill. And because he does so much feathering and cross-hatching, and I really don't want to lose any of that while inking the piece. So it was a challenge to follow his work, and you know, it's like I really didn't want to put any of my style into that. I wanted to be, you know, wanted it to look like his work, but I did also want to punch it up and make it that much tighter, that much, you know, clearer of what's going on within the image. And I was successful, but it took me 3 times as long.
Gotcha.
But I will say, like, working with Jim Calfury, the challenge with his work, because he's so tight with his pencils, the challenge more often than not was to, you know, to subtly punch up everything, you know, because he loved the contrast within the image, like making everything that much more three-dimensional. So he would, you know, he would have a shot of Aquaman swimming in the ocean with fish around them. Then in the background, we'll see coral and just sort of not mountain faces, but you know, just the bottom of the ocean and stuff in the distance, and really to punch up Aquaman because he's the one in your face, but also to put a stamp on the fish around him to say that there's sort of equal distance, and then the background would be a lot more subtle and thinner lines.
How much time when you get somebody's pencils for the first time do you kind of just sit back and just sort of look for a little while? I feel like that would be a tough thing for me to jump into. I would just be sitting there evaluating forever.
I do that, and that's part of why I'm a slow inker. I like to sit with the pencils for as long as I possibly could. Sometimes sitting with it means me actually just staring at the page. But sometimes it just means me looking at it intently, and then just, you know, just going off and doing other things.
I have to do that with my own work, I feel like, so often because I'm so inexperienced with inking that I feel like every time I go to ink something, I'm kind of learning how to ink that thing for the first time. So even with my own stuff, it seems like I got to sit back and really kind of think, okay, if I put the grays here, then I'll need to figure out where to do this so it doesn't just fade in the background. Sometimes my eyes just kind of go cross-eyed with the whole thing and got to start over the next day or whatnot. But
yeah, well, one of the good things, I mean, you know, if you're a full artist, if you're just like penciling your work and inking your work, the greatest thing to do is like pencil out a page. You know, a lot of people usually thumbnail a page first, and then they'll do, if not finished pencils, they'll at least have the basics on the page. Then the greatest thing to do is to do a series of thumbnails, executing the page within the thumbnails, and then go in with a big black marker and figure out how to spot your blacks. You know, should I go, you know, just like really heavy with shadows and I really do wish I had a big thick marker around. I think I do.
That seems like such an obvious thing right there that hadn't really occurred to me before with like thumbnailing inks. Like I've thumbnailed my pencils for layout and for lettering and words and boxes and all that sort of stuff, but I never really thought to do that with the inks.
Yeah.
I feel like I remember seeing this like in an article from Magnolia, like in a Wizard magazine a long time ago, with that idea of like figuring out your spots first, like instead of your lines and then your shadows, like literally figuring out like from the design aspect of the heavy shadows first.
Yeah, and you could also like figure out like just what's the most dramatic way to light this.
Yeah.
You know, if you follow digital drawing or video game creation or whatever, I mean, they really get into it heavily with figures and environments and it's, you know, you can apply all that sort of knowledge to your comic work or your illustration work, and it really does help. You know, even if you don't even have to do it on paper, but it helps to at least initialize it on paper to sort of figure out how is this best going to look.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if somebody hires you to say do a cover, you want to give them the best damn image you can. And sometimes it's like, you know, your basic drawing could be phenomenal, but if you light it flat, it's going to look flat. So here's a little figure, and this is just one, but you can, you know, you can decide, okay, I'm gonna do a middle shadow to it, and how could it look? And while I'm doing this, you could talk about whatever nonsense.
That's all we got is nonsense. Well, hey, while he's doing that real quick, David, as far as our art check-in, what have you been able to get done this week?
I'm killing it.
You're killing it. All right, try to be humble.
In the exact place, if not better, than I wanted to be from last week. I have finished all of my commission work for the most part. I have like one where like he literally just wants to send me like a color scheme thing, and I slap in the colors in the logo that I've already created. And I have finished, and I already have it ready to roll for my day one of Inktober. I'm penciling page 2 and 3 of my comic right now. I'm just in the zone. I'm ready to roll. I'm stoked on finally being into my personal stuff and saying no to every commission that comes my way this month.
That's awesome. I'm really happy to see your book coming along. That spread right there. I can tell you're pretty excited about what you're doing, and I love seeing art from people that are excited about what they're doing.
I mean, I would be excited to open up a can of pop. Man, that's the kind of person I am, you know. Everything's excitement with me. So
nothing wrong with enthusiasm.
That best damn can of pop I've ever eaten. By the can too, and that's why I say eat.
I'll just eat the can of soda. That'll work.
So,
see, nonsense. How's that, Peter?
I also wanted to. Peter started talking about all this traditional stuff and being the giant supply nerd that I am. Like I was really stoked hearing about that. Whenever I first started picking up inking as like my thing after I got out of college and realized that's what I loved. The Series 7, right? He was talking about that. I love these brushes. Yep. I have a bunch of them too. I use these whenever I'm doing this kind of work where I'm not just like doodling out a page, but just like a pen or whatever. But yeah, I love this. I think the idea of like no matter how you end up inking in the end, like starting traditionally is an important thing in my brain, like digitally or whatever you do, because there's just so many intricacies of like, it's like you're in Photoshop and you grab that brush and it gives you that certain line weight, like understanding that the reason that brush exists is because it's mimicking a brush or a quill or whatever. I think that's like an important thing for an artist to have in their skill set.
Yeah, and you know, it's like a lot of artists are painters, and you know, they're using brushes, you know, and it's you know, it's like if you decide you're a traditional painter and you go into digital painting, having all that traditional work in your system, in your gut, built up already, will help with your digital painting.
Yeah,
you know, all that knowledge, all that experience.
Well, it's like the same thing with like the photo editing stuff. When people get into that kind of stuff, they've never even touched the traditional photo editing. They have no idea why the tool is called the burn tool and all these other things that exist. I think it's just such an important thing to like at least touch or know like where it all came from.
So this was just a silly little drawing, and I went in with marker, and that gives me a good guide as to how to approach it when I go in and ink.
Love it.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know why that didn't occur to me before. That when I'm trying to figure out how to, that makes me want to, like, you know, when I scan in my image, you know, and stuff like that, I could print it off smaller even and kind of mess, you know, put 3 of them on a page and try a couple different ideas of how to, you know, lay out the inks and everything. I'm going to nerd out on that one.
Yeah, I mean, you could do it traditionally, but you could also, like, if you have a fully penciled page, you could scan it and put it in a computer and play around with an art program and just mess around with the blacks in that and see the different versions and whatever suits your fancy. Go with the best, the best one.
I love that. I'm totally stealing that. I'm going to tell people to do that and pretend it was my idea.
There you go.
I've been doing this digital. Like I pencil everything by hand and off digital color ink sometimes just for fun. But that idea you just said, that's why I love digital. I'll get in a thumbnail digitally nowadays because of that. Like just get a big thick brush digitally and just like play with like big shapes to understand compositions before I get into it.
Yeah, I mean, as an artist, I suck at composition, but it's just a matter of spending the time, whatever you're doing, just a matter of spending a couple of minutes focusing on, construction and, storytelling and all this sort of basic stuff and just putting the time in, not rushing ahead like, okay, this guy's, this hero's got to, slam the villain into a car. Here's a car. Here's the villain being slammed in. Here's the hero. If you really spend some time, you can make it something exciting, something that jumps off the page rather than something that just happens.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but when I was reading comics or finding comics when I was a little kid, I don't think I was first reading those X-Men comics going, wow, look at this story beat from here to here. It was just like opening it up and seeing a single image that you could just stare at for all day and just pick it apart, whether it was a comic or something that happened on the inside or whatever. I don't know. Like you said, taking the time to make sure it's something special.
Yeah, I mean, it's like clearly with Inktober, the greatest thing is that you're going to see hundreds of drawings each day, and how some people just do simple things, and here's a little figure, and that's inked. So I did my drawing for today, and it might be boring as hell, but I accomplished the challenge. Yay. Or you'll see really intricate drawings by top professionals that will make you sick to your stomach. That it's like, why am I doing this? It's like, they'll have some half-naked girl with a flowing skirt with wind in the background, clouds swarming around her, and you'll be like, oh my God, I'll never draw again or whatever.
I know. I just assume that all those people cheated, and I feel better about it.
Reposting from forever ago, and I forgot they made that image.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, they probably just stole it off of Google.
Right.
Things like that. No, it is really cool to see because, like we said before, I've seen people get bent out of shape on what Inktober means, whether it means to do it on paper or do it digitally. I've even seen it. So what's the tagline? It says 31 drawings in 31 days. So the goal is to make 31 ink drawings. I've heard people get all upset because people are just drawing in ink. They're not actually inking, which is a specific art form with cartooning and making comics, and they like get uptight about that. And it's like, just let people participate. If they want to draw a stick figure in ink, that's fine. If they want to draw something that makes me want to slip my wrist in a warm bathtub because I will never be able to do that, then that's good too. But I don't know. It does seem, that's why I like Inktober, is when there's not trollish type people getting bent out of shape about silly stuff. It does seem like yet another, on a big macro scale, a cool community because everyone just really enjoys getting down on it.
Yeah, I haven't experienced negativity within the event myself. Maybe I'm not trying to track it down or whatever.
You need to be more controversial.
But it's like, with anything good, with anything that takes off, you're going to have your haters. You're going to have people arguing the opposite point. And to me, that's like, when it comes to art, You know, it's just like it's almost just discussing. You know, it's like you dissect things, you turn things on its face to understand it better. So you might be saying all negative things, but you're just trying to you know, take it apart and see how it works. So, you know, what seems like negative sometimes it isn't. It's just, you know, people trying to learn more.
Right.
See, that right there is why you're a great person for this community, Peter. You're like, even people are being annoying and just droning on about what they don't like. They're still just trying to figure it out. But you're absolutely correct. I mean, that's an excellent point.
Curious.
That's why we need people like you, Peter.
Aw. I appreciate you guys too.
Man, anything. I don't know. I love the power of comics as far as bringing folks together. It really is cool.
So I noticed we got a bunch of people. Well, a couple of people. Is that's you in the chat, Scott?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't notice you typing.
Then we got Red and Ace. Ace had asked a question before about, I think directed towards you, Peter, about what drives an artist to make the change from piece artist to comics. I tried to ask him what he meant by that. I think maybe like if you were like in art school as like a fine artist or something, and then you mentioned that like you left art for a while and then came back and jumped into comics.
Well, I grew up. I mean, my particular story is I grew up reading comics. You know, back in the day, I was first introduced to comics actually at a barber shop, because you know you have kids there. Well, you have everybody going there for haircuts, but you have kids there waiting, and they have no attention spans, and just fidgety and jumping in and out of their chairs and running around like lunatics. But the hair cutting people, the barber, had comic books as well as magazines and whatnot. But some of the first comic books I was introduced to were there, and they had like Archie and Richie Rich and that sort of stuff. So completely safe. You know, because even back then, there was dangerous stuff they could have had to hide out. But yeah, completely G-rated comic books for us to just like look at drawings and oh wow, that's cool. Later, you know, I was introduced to Marvel and DC characters, and then like independent characters and whatnot. But let's see. Let me actually look at. You're talking about the comic den?
Yes.
Okay. What drives an artist to make the change from piece artist to comics? So in my case, I had the mindset initially to become a comic artist first, because I loved comics, and to me, it was more attractive to get into comics than to, you know, get into illustration. Illustration was more of a foreign concept growing up until I got into high school and college. Became more aware of a wider expanse of art out there. But I guess you know, there's like illustration as a career has become harder and harder from my knowledge of people in the illustration industry that have sort of flock to like the idea of them doing comics, because now with the advent of comic movies becoming more and more of a thing, because that was like years and years ago, that was like frowned on, like, you're making a comic book movie? That's silly. That's stupid. That's whatever. Nobody will care, or why would you make a serious movie from a stupid illustrated?
Now it happens so
joke
often,
book?
people don't even realize that it's something that's based on a comic.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's plenty of movies now that are like originally like a comic idea or a comic series. A lot more independent comic creations are being made into movies. Just recently, like, for those that don't know, my brother, one of my brothers, I have 3 older brothers. One of them, Jimmy Palmiotti, is a big comic guy. He's the high end of the industry. He's currently 99% comic book writer. If you go to Walmart, DC has recently been publishing 100-page giant-sized comics that are like a short news story, as well as a lot of reprints. But it's a way to introduce comics to a whole new generation of kids by putting it in Walmart that didn't previously have comics. And so he's got he wrote a Batman story, he wrote a Superman story, he has an ongoing Wonder Woman story, and an ongoing Justice League story.
Wow. Busy.
Yeah, but he has had, I believe it's 9 different Kickstarters, and it's all just like graphic novels and one-shot ideas. One of which was called Random Acts of Violence. That is currently being filmed, I believe, in Canada. Anyway, him and his wife, Amanda Connor, another big name in the industry, his wife, were on the set. I don't know if they got a chance to do a cameo or whatever. I kind of think they might have, but we'll see when the film comes out. Yeah.
Geez, no one can say that the Palmiottis just sit around.
So Ronnie, otherwise known as Red, says like when Blade came out, people were like, "Oh, a vampire movie."
Yeah, not even realizing it was a comic book movie. Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually Marvel's first good superhero movie.
Yep. And aren't they still talking about trying to fold him back into the universe, like Wesley Snipes and everything?
I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen. I haven't heard squat on the idea of that.
I read a thing where like him and his people were sort of interested in it, and they had an idea for a movie and they had an idea for a TV show that they were excited about taking to Marvel or something like that. So I think he could still do it. I think Snipes could pull it off.
I know that Wesley Snipe is a go-getter. He, like, years ago, like, my brother Jimmy was a part of Marvel Knights, for those that might remember that. Marvel Knights was at a time when Marvel wasn't doing so good. They were bankrupt. They were selling off characters, and they experimented by having my brother Jimmy and Joe Quesada come in and edit a bunch of titles. So they actually had their own office on the roof of the Marvel building. That was separate from the other editorial offices. and they gave him characters that were like failing. They said, well, none of these books are bringing in numbers. Why don't you, get your own, bring in artists not currently working for Marvel and put them on these titles, and we'll publish them and see if they do better. So a lot of those experimental titles, if you look at Netflix, a lot of them wound up being the characters that are part of the Netflix. They did Punisher, they did Daredevil, they also did Ghost Rider. Well, Ghost Rider wound up on Agents of Shield. But it was a success, and it sort of brought Marvel back to life.
That's awesome. I know people like gripe about, I don't know, have their stuff to say about the big two. Indie comics is the way to go, and the big two suck and stuff like that. But I'll always be a 10-year-old kid loving, the X-Men, Avengers, and Batman and stuff. And I just feel like there's a place for all of that stuff,
Yeah.
Just more comics, just everywhere, all kinds.
Okay, so I almost forget my point
Oh, sorry.
No. My own fault. So one of the titles was Black Panther, and while all that Marvel Nights was happening, Wesley approached my brother and said, "We should do why don't we do a Black Panther movie with me as Black Panther?"
That could have been pretty sweet.
Yeah, but I consider what they finally did a great thing. So eventually it did work out that Black Panther did get his movie, and it got a great actor, great cast, great director doing it all.
For sure,
it worked out.
And at the place and time, it was probably a bit better to stick with the vampire genre a little bit more than the technology of Wakanda in the late 90s.
Yeah. But the funny thing is, he approached my brother. And it's like, my brother was like, I have nothing to do. I don't control Marvel. I don't control what they do.
I know. Well, hello, Mr. Snipes, but I got to tell you, I'm not in charge. But, that's awesome. We are getting at like an hour. David, do you have any questions for Mr. Palmiotti?
Honestly, like he said most of what my curiousness or whatever. I do have kind of like one final like little thought of like, because you've worked and you've done it like professionally for other people and stuff, when you do your own inking, has it like influenced that? Like, can you do less of what you need to do for your own inking and get, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. All my experience is all my experience, and what I bring to my own books. And this will really to me, it's always about building a team. It's never like doing it right the first time.
Right.
So, this is something I'll have more to say about when I have like 6 issues of 4 different books out. But just starting to get my feet wet and push my ideas forward. I'm just trying to do good books,
right?
And as I get further along, I'm sure I'll be a lot more heavily influenced about how I worked with other people, how they worked with me, what I've seen of final product. If anything, however amazing this might look to you, the actual the work involved, the original art, um, when you get the floppy in your hand, it looks way different. You know, there's letters all over it. There's heavy coloring on it. It's about finding the balance, to me, and it takes time to get there. You know, one of the books I could always point to as to a solid team that the book was executed in the best way was X-Men with Claremont and Byrne, because as a fan, I was excited for each issue to come out, and I poured over each issue. The art was gorgeous. The story was exciting and involving, and that's what I want to do. You know, so I want to recreate a lot of the joy of when I was young reading comics, and as well as today. You know, I still get joy out of reading comics and looking at the art and just, you know, being glass-eyed about it all. You know, I want to give that experience to other people. Right. And you know, it's like, it's almost like, you know, you don't want to see the man behind the curtain. You just want to put the product out there and just like hope that they'll catch on to it.
For sure. Well, I definitely know for a lot of us, we're definitely excited to, when you got, you know, 7 issues of 7 titles, there's a lot of us who are going to be interested in all of those. So we're excited to see that stuff come out, because the stuff you're working on is exciting to see, and you're always working on something cool. That's for sure.
Oh, thank you, and really appreciate being on your show. And you know, it's like I was recently introduced to both of you, and I'm really glad to be following you and your, you know, productivity, and, you know, just watching you both get better in the short time that I've known you.
Well, I appreciate that. It's pretty exciting, you know, to be able to link up on the interwebs here. Like I said before, to be able to, for you to take the time to talk with us, being somebody who's been in the trenches, who knows how it works and everything, and be able to share your expertise with us. So we definitely appreciate that. You kind of started to touch on it a little bit there, talking with the Claremont run on X-Men as being something that really influenced you. Since we are talking inking and everything, is there somebody that if someone here wanted to go check out an inker or artwork that has been influential to you, is there somebody, whether past or present, that comes to mind, or a couple people?
I could list 1,000 people.
How about just the first 500?
Okay. Well, okay. Believe it or not, the main influence at the very beginning of my comic career for me was Bernie Wrightson. His work on Swamp Thing, his work on the EC horror titles. Definitely, like, if you haven't seen his work on Frankenstein, you should definitely go check that out. It is, you know, he's just phenomenal, whether it's his Lusa work or, you know, the work on his Frankenstein was like, that was just a project of love that he spent. I don't even know how long he spent on that. But each print of artwork from that probably took him weeks, because there's so much work involved. And it was definitely, all of that was something I was looking at. And to the extent where I would copy it either just by eyeing it and using the brush and using a quill and trying to copy or mimic, or maybe, you know, put my own influence in it, or But yeah, I've always been blown away by his work. There's also P. Russell.
Say that one
Russell.
more time.
P. Craig Russell.
P. Craig. Okay.
Yeah, who's done work with Neil Gaiman on Neil Gaiman's DC work with Vertigo,
Sandman, and all that. Or?
Sandman. Yeah,
Okay.
he's done a lot of work on Sandman. For me, I was introduced to his work via a title called Kill Raven that's Marvel put out in the 70s, which was gorgeous work and so unlike any other superhero title at that time, because it was just pretty more than anything else in a time where, you know, superheroes were tough, and, you know, it's like, and just like punching people left and right in the face.
That sounds kind of like that would make sense why he was then working on Sandman like that.
Yeah, it's very elaborate and you know, flowy fabrics and stars and just pretty. I can't think of better words, but you get my meaning.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. Both those names are ones I've been hearing, and I feel like I kind of came to comics late, so I'll always wear my ignorance on my sleeve if it gets me a couple new names to check out. I feel like I've heard Joshua Kemble talk a lot about Bernie Wrightson.
Bernie Wrightson, yeah, he's amazing. He passed away, so he's no longer with us. But he's done amazing work. In fact, you know, in the Marvel Knights era, he did some Punisher work, which was a little bizarre, but wasn't his best work. But my brother was excited to work with him. Craig Russell has got he had a bunch of Kickstarters for his storytelling. He is a phenomenal storytelling, as well as designing comic book pages or just illustration work. Yeah, he is somebody definitely to look at. I can actually grab a book of his if you give me a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. While
Okay.
you're grabbing that, how about you, David? What's somebody for folks listening out there getting ready for Inktober? What's an inker that you love that you think people can check out, whether old or new?
It's actually, like, it's funny that I say these names too, because they're like super inspirational for me, but like my style is drawn so far away from it. But oh my gosh, now I'm blanking. Matteo Scalera, you've seen him. Yeah. He's like one of my favorite all time. And he just is like the really thick and heavy, and he's all about that like way more blacks than whites on the page kind of guy.
And that's like Black Science and such, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, gosh, I got the other names slipping my brain too, but it's all that heavy blacks and stuff. But it's all about that stylized line, I think, is what I love about seeing it.
Yeah. All right, what you got there, Peter?
So this is a book, P. Craig Russell.
Oh, very cool.
And it's more pencil drawings than anything else, but it has some finished pieces. And this is Sandman right here.
I'm gonna say that looks awfully familiar.
But yeah, it's like it gives you like his breakdowns for a piece and then his finishes on it.
Oh, that's an awesome art book.
Yeah, it's just gorgeous work. I love his style. I mean, if you look at some of my better drawings, you can see the influence.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, but he's very designy and just like his line work just flows and breathes and you know, it's definite.
Yeah, it works. It looks like it. Excuse me, works great for that dreamscape stuff.
Oh.
And then some of his line work, I don't know if it's just like looking at your book through my computer screen here, but some of his flat line work almost seems to have a little bit of a Mobius look to it. I'm not super familiar with Mobius, but looking at some of his sort of flat line work stuff.
Little bit, yeah. I mean, you know, it's you know, he is definitely influenced by the illustrated greats before him, so both him and Mobius were influenced by other artists that, I'm no art historian, but it's definitely like,
That's
it's just
beautiful.
gorgeous, just gorgeous work. And like, like I was talking about, like heavy blacks on my page, like you can see here, he's surrounded by black, making him pop so much better.
Mm.
Is that kind of like a different way of haloing where you like black out around it instead of like going white, I guess? So like the detail, instead of like losing the detail in white, you lose it kind of in black to make
Yeah.
something pop?
Yeah, I mean, that's like a Mike Mignola thing to do too, where like, it's almost like it almost disappears into the black sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, that is excellent.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, Bernie Wrightson, Craig Russell, Al Williamson. If you know Star Wars illustrated books back when, Al Williamson did a lot of Star Wars art, the comic book movie adaptions of that, the first 3 Star Wars movies. He has been an illustrator. He has been an inker. He's another artist who passed away, but I was lucky enough to meet him and hang out with him a bunch of times. Al Williamson, one of his greatest works that I love is Spider-Man 2099.
Ooh.
And he inked Rick Leonardi. And that work on that book was another highlight of what comics can be, in my opinion.
Yeah, that was a great.
Yeah, it is a great series. It's something worth finding. I don't know if it was ever collected, but it should definitely be a book that a collection would be a great thing. But it was just gorgeous to look at, and it was really well written. That was Peter David, who also wrote the run of Aquaman. I'm known for. If you're looking for my run on Aquaman, it's the one when he had a hook.
When Aquaman had a hook, that's awesome. I had no idea. I'm getting that one for sure.
Yeah, they're actually they're collecting it, so you'll be able to pick up a trade of that, and anybody who wants me to sign it, I'll be more than glad to. You could ask me my address, and I'll mail it mail it to you.
That's awesome, Peter. Well, those are some awesome recommendations, but like you said, folks out there, start off with looking at Peter Palmiotti stuff because he's an amazing inker. I love following your stuff, Peter, because it's always exciting to look at. And especially because you're always working, you work with like different artists and everything, so it's cool to see your touch applied to different artwork and everything. I love it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I want to get you a good plug here before we do go with Has Studio, the human art studio and everything. When people leave here, where's the first place they should go to find out what you're doing?
The best place, because I'm making more of a commitment to my YouTube channel, is go to YouTube and find me. I'm Peter Palmiotti there. Currently a little Has Comics logo going on. But I'm doing my 100 days. An idea you liked, which I'll finally be getting to. I'm going to be doing my morning show coming up, which is a half hour. I was heavily influenced by like morning sort of network shows. And I'm going to do a half hour sort of art show and maybe a little bit of news, a little bit of tips, kind of thing. A half hour is not enough to do a lot, but I'm going to try to squeeze in some stuff. And yeah, I'll be doing live streams. I do gatherings on Studio Synergy with other artists. Anybody who knows RT Bear, he was an image guy from way back when. He'll be joining me on an upcoming Studio Synergy. And yeah, all kinds of fun stuff. But you can find me across the web under Peter Palmiotti on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and various other places.
You really are everywhere out there, and like I said before, he's active on all that and has interesting stuff going on all those avenues. So please, anybody coming here to check out I'd Rather Be Drawing, please go subscribe and follow and comment and thumbs up. Even thumbs down if you're feeling randy, because it all helps us. But go find Peter Palmiotti and troll the hell out of him.
Also on Patreon, if you want to support my work. Yes, go to patreon.com/Peter Palmiotti.
Killer. We're a little bit slow on the uptake sometimes, but we'll get a bunch of those links put down below after the show and everything too. So
cool.
Look for those. I can't thank you enough, Peter, for joining us here. Real quick, David. Also, where can we find you when you're not here? Oh, real quick, I did want to ask you, Peter. I'm sorry, David. Hold, please. Peter, what day of your 100 days are you on right now, so people will kind of know where you're at on your journey?
26 was just posted.
26. You're over a quarter way there. That's kind of, I think, like the first big benchmark where you're like, okay, I'm in it. I'm in it. Very cool. All right, so keep an eye on that too, because he's got his 100 days going. All right, now, David, you may speak.
Are you sure?
I suppose.
All right. So, oh my gosh, I always do this thing where I'm listening so much, so I kind of forget what I'm supposed to say. But so you can find me Instagram, Art of Mr. Fleming, and then you can find me on Facebook at Mr. David Fleming. And then, like I said, I've got shops and YouTube channel, all that stuff, but I always do like a link tree of some kind so you can find my stuff really easily. And remember, same thing, leave a positive comment, leave a negative comment, because it means you're just curious. I mean, I learned that tonight.
Exactly. You're not being negative. You're just trying to dissect something. And tell us the name of that comic you're working on too, so as we start seeing that and hearing about it, we start really getting that word out there.
Yeah, so Analog Missions is the name of my first little set of, it's 3 short stories that all tie in together, because I'm really into the idea of not ginormous series, but like short stories that kind of are just a fun little thing to get in and get out with, but also have like a bigger meaning to them. So
I love that.
Is that like science fiction? You would categorize it?
Yes, very much.
Okay, cool.
I know
That's
it's
good.
probably putting you on the spot, but for Peter who might not know, do you have like a little elevator pitch of Analog Missions?
I'm actually working on that. We talked about this in some episodes in the past, but I'm really bad at summing up what I want to say my thing is about, because it's not about a planet full of robotic human people who destroyed their planet because they fought over the idea of going more technologically advanced or sticking more to nature, but that's kind of like the world in which the stories I have to tell will exist in.
That right there, I think should be could be the pitch. My story isn't about a whole bunch of robots on a planet that's this and this and that, but there is a whole lot of that too. Like, I'd be interested.
Yeah, whatever would grab the reader. I mean, that would grab me.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe we should do like a brainstorming session on a future show where we're working on elevator pitches and good ways and bad ways to do that. Because every time someone asks me about mine, I drone on for like 15 minutes and go, whoops.
Yeah, right. Well, it's just like super hard to like. When I write a story, it's always because it's almost like a parable is the way I think. It's like I have this idea or this thought to give you, and I can't tell you that because the story has to tell you that. So it's like hard for me to sum it up in just like a sentence.
I know. Like, speaking of pitches, I know, like, this is a superhero comic, retro. You know, it's like, but that doesn't really describe it or what it will be. You know.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I'm just holding off for now until I have product to sell. So.
I think that would be an awesome one. I think artists need to get together more on stuff for idea jamming or discussing how to price stuff or work on elevator pitches. I feel like having conversations with other humans is kind of the best way to kind of get there sometimes. But
I usually do with other robots.
Well, that makes good sense. I just learned tonight that Peter Palmiotti's a robot. That makes sense when you look at his inking.
Secret's out.
I love it. Well, I love what's going on with the comic so far, David, and I'm excited to kind of see the rest of what's going on in your Inktober. So pay attention to both these guys for their Inktober. As far as me, I will be participating some as well, but I am trying to get my comic October going, spelled Oktobr, and I'll have more on that soon. Almost got it written out so I can really start thumbnailing and scripting. So for more on that, if you don't see me here on our I'd Rather Be Drawing YouTube channel, check me out over on Instagram under Mr. Green Draws. That's Mr. Draws. And also stay tuned. I did get my Mr. Green's Monster Zine, finally the proof for it. Got to take care of a couple issues, but here before too long, not only will this book be for sale, but so will all the originals that I made for it. I've kind of been saving those to post for sale until I got the book ready. So there's my little sales plug. Oh, and just to make it count, I'm sorry, I got to do this real quick because I don't want to have to go make a separate video. This is my 100 Days of Making Comics, day 95. So there you go. Got that in there. I am working on my script before the show and after the show, so I'll keep that going. Thank you guys both for coming on and joining us here on I'd Rather Be Motivated. Anybody else have any little closing stuff?
Make art. Make comics.
art.
Took the words out of my mouth.
I love it. All right, make art. David, when you're ready, sign us off. And everybody, go make art. You're out of excuses.
Right, exactly. All right. Take it easy, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Peace.